It's the Church of Jesus Christ. So Stephen, upcoming election, a lot of critical issues to discuss and to think about, but from a Christian perspective, in your opinion, which of the issues are most important?
I appreciate you asking that because, most people will think I'm going to talk about abortion or immigration or LGBTQ issues, but I'll tell you the main issue Christians ought to be concerned about in America regarding this election is freedom of speech. That may sound like it's a distant third or fourth for some folks, but in Canada right now, pastors are actually being arrested for speaking out against homosexuality or criticizing the government in any way. Same thing's happening in Europe. So with a slight shift in an understanding of the First Amendment, what we're allowed to say and what we're not allowed to say, we can see serious oppression. So every other issue rests on the church's ability to speak freely their biblical values. And if free speech is restricted, everything else gets worse. In our country, we've always believed that you can say anything you want to say, that words don't hurt people, actions do, and that should be protected. But we're seeing with some recent administrations, and we're seeing in the courts that they're saying that's not the way it is. You can be harmed, you can be fired for speech, and that's perhaps the most dangerous trend in America right now.
Often, when Christians talk about the transgender movement or the gay rights movement, we get labeled as a hate group, we get labeled as bigots.
Right.
But why is this so important that we get this right, particularly when it comes to a political election for the sake of a flourishing society?
Well, often in public policy, you have an issue that if it morphs into the danger it can be, it will endanger other freedoms with it. So, for example, California has just passed a law in which if a child in school decides to change its gender and thus its pronouns, the parents do not have to be told. If that were to spread around the country, think of the other freedoms, think of the other things that could be kept from parents, think of the other abuse of children that would be covered up by the public schools and the courts. So this is absolutely a serious issue.
Let's discuss the southern border and immigration. Many people, particularly inside the church, say we need to be hospitable to all people. And a lot of times that translates into you need to have open borders. We need to welcome everybody, accept everyone. We need to be hospitable to everyone. Can we as a nation be both hospitable but also have law and order and a correct pathway towards citizenship, particularly when it comes to the crisis at the open border?
There's no question. Often our debates center around extremes. It's extremes talking to each other. The fact is we want immigration. We've benefited from immigration. Most of our nation is immigrants. There aren't any original people except the Native Americans. And so we do want immigration. But as one of my favorite comedians says, just sign the guest book on the way in, right? Just get registered and take a course that requires that you understand American history and American values. So there's no question that we can have a sane immigration policy, but we all know that millions pouring over a river undocumented and then perhaps later taken care of financially and given the vote without even being citizens or speaking the language, this is going to damage America. So that's what I'm often challenging our congressmen and senators about in DC is, look, we don't have to have people pouring over the border by the millions. There's a sane policy. Let's get serious and implement it. And that's what we should be calling for.
October 7th, 2023. For many seems like a decade ago, but we know the atrocities that occurred. We know that anti-Semitism is still an issue. How should the people of God still be concerned, number one, about the crisis in Israel, but also about this issue of anti-Semitism in the world and particularly in our nation?
It's one of the great pressing issues of our time. I don't know if you've seen the videos where journalists go in and ask the protesters, what does from the river to the sea even mean? And what does Hamas stand for? And is Israel really an apartheid country? And the protesters don't have any idea what they're talking about. They've got a friend maybe from a Middle Eastern country, or they've read some rhetoric and they're protesting. So you have a combination of violence, hate, and ignorance. We've got to do a better job of educating people about Israel, about the Middle East, about the heritage of the Jews, about their contributions to the world.
In June 2022, the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court, overturned Roe. And it was a great victory for those that have been defending the sanctity of human life from the moment of conception. It does seem like there's some discouragement in the pro-life movement right now. They see a lot of politicians that seem to be abandoning the fight for the sanctity of human life. They're seeing it maybe removed from their party's platform that they affiliate with. So what is the encouragement and the perspective that the people of God should have, particularly those that are super concerned about continuing to advance the pro-life message, and as many have said, to not only make abortion illegal, but to make it unthinkable in this nation?
Well, wouldn't it be a disaster if we have this amazing Supreme Court victory, and then because one party kind of backs away a bit from its pro-life stance, we just throw up our hands and stop contending and stop changing minds and hearts and stop working for the cause? Now, it's certainly true that not everyone is as pro-life as we want them to be, but you pick people up where they are and you keep contending for the best and you keep making the case. But people, especially Christians, need to trust that God is at work, need to celebrate the victories they've been given, stay optimistic, and understand that politics often looks dirty and then it rights itself on the other side, particularly of an election. So, I talk to a lot of Christians. I get a lot of calls when these decisions are made about party platforms and at conventions. And I'm always saying the same thing. Calm down, trust God, He's at work, let's do the best that we can do, and don't believe everything you see on the evening news.
How can the people of God in America be praying for our nation? Any things that come to mind, particular prayer points with the upcoming election and with the state of our union?
You know, I really care about this issue because I study revivals and the history of religious movements. And prayer before big national disasters, big prayer movements, I believe have made a huge difference, particularly in American history. In fact, you can actually look at a rise and fall pattern in American history. Religious revivals and then decline, and then religious revivals and then decline. But prayer is always at the root of it. So praying for our nation, praying for our leaders, praying for those that we despise and dislike in the national debate, this is absolutely essential. Let me say it a couple of ways. First of all, it's commanded. We don't have a choice. Pray for your enemies. Pray for those who despitefully use you, Scripture says. Second of all, we know it's the highest weapon we have. Yes, vote. Yes, lobby. Yes, get educated. Yes, teach and train others. Yes, mobilize. But if you're not praying, then you're fighting your battle completely at a natural level.
Often Christians spend a lot of time complaining about the culture, complaining about politics, complaining about the nation. But Christians, we should be the most optimistic people in the world.
Yes.
What hope do you have for America and for this cultural moment?
You know, I have great hope for America, and part of the reason is that I am a historian, and I know that things have been far, far worse. So I have a great deal of optimism because I believe in a sovereign God, because I believe there are age-old covenants still affecting our history. I pray every day what the Puritans on the Mayflower wrote: we sailed for the glory of God and the advancement of the Christian faith. So every day I say, Lord, I pick up that torch. I want to live today for the glory of God and the advancement of the Christian faith. And if we'll renew those age-old covenants and get God's wisdom for our generation and live fiery, dynamic Christian lives in the service of His kingdom on earth, we will see things change in our generation.
Stephen, so appreciate your friendship, your leadership in my life, leadership now in these ministries that God has called us to continue to lead for the sake of the next generation. Thank you for your voice. The nation needs to hear your voice and the perspective you give, particularly the Christian perspective on what's happening in this nation, what's happening in this culture. Just incredibly grateful for you.
Rob, thanks for letting me be part of the team, man. It's a privilege.